Managers and employers. Who was your strangest employee? Sam the Wolfman believed he was a werewolf. He would ask for full moons off, and if you scheduled him for one of those nights he would be a no-show. Boss man kept him on because when it wasn't a full moon he was a dang good worker. Kenneth. He never stopped talking. Asked all the girls for their numbers. Didn't get any. Had to have numerous closed door meetings about sexual harassment. As if the court mandated ankle bracelet didn't teach him about that. And once he was finally fired, proceeded to come into the store as if he was still part of the team. Oh, he also meowed at customers and staff. Strange thing, he wasn't the only one who meowed. Another member we had, Robert, the pathological liar. He was enlisted in the military for 6 years and his fiancee's mom tried to kill him for the insurance money the army gives. He won a 2012 Camaro from a contest, supercharged. Another employee offered to buy it from him to call him out on his bulls, and even brought in the check. Robert failed to show up that day and the car was stolen. He told stories about me to my staff from HS. We did go to the same school at the same time, but I am 4 years younger, so we only had one overlapping year. He was held back a year. These stories never happened. He worked 3 jobs and had over 50k saved up, even though his best friend got him the current job and told us none of that was true. He was a manager at a different chain store but left because the owner tried to sleep with him. The owner does sleep with his managers, but this guy was never one. He could barely ring in an order. He was shot and stabbed so he couldn't come into work, but the next day he was miraculously fine. There are lots more but I honestly can't remember them all. The best part? He stuck to them all, never forgot the details, and never changed his story. He was a good guy, but man, you're not impressing anyone. Bob started on a team of mine and told me straight out that he was gay and used to be a preacher. Neither means anything to me, but 6 months later, he told me he really wasn't that gay and he never was a preacher. That's so Bob. Mr. and Mrs. Stilton. I received 2 separate resumes from a Mr. and Mrs. Stilton who had worked together at dozens of different jobs over a period of 15 years or so. They had started and left the same roles on exactly the same dates. The job I was recruiting for was a bog standard telesales role and the couple had lots of experience. Before I had read their resumes, I had received a phone call from Mr. Stilton and he came across as charming silver-tongued salesperson. Obviously, once I received the resumes I found it strange and started phoning the other companies to find out the score. It turned out that, at first, they would only be taken as a team. If you wanted him, you had to take her. They all said that he was an amazing salesperson but was incredibly possessive over his wife and wouldn't let her out of his sight. I spoke to their last manager and he said that he fired them both after he hit her in front of everyone for looking at another guy. This seemed to be a common M. I found myself feeling sorry for her and wanting to assist. I asked Mr. Stilton to come for an interview, alone, in a coffee shop. One of my female colleagues called Mrs. Stilton at the same time, asked her a few questions and gave her the number of a helpline for women who were in abusive relationships. I have no idea what happened to them. Needless to say, I didn't hire them. Fair play for you for actually taking some action and trying to help her. This guy Kenneth. He was in his mid-late 40s. Used to be a badass and rode a motorcycle and his mom passed away about 10 years ago and he apparently had a nervous breakdown. He hasn't drove since. Walks 5 miles to work and from every day. Talks to himself. And doesn't buy anything. I don't think he has any food in his fridge because he is desperate for food every day and I've ever seen him turn down anything for free even if it's the last bite of an old hamburger. I've seen him eating food and drinking half-empty soda cans out of the garbage even though he's earning 60k plus a year. He doesn't shower or wash his clothes, but by far the weirdest thing is a few months ago I saw him at the casino playing roulette well dressed with an old lady posse surrounding him. That's actually really sad. His mother's passing really messed him up. 2 months ago I got a new job as an IT supervisor. I'm in charge of 3 techs and 2 analysts. The team includes Dwayne, a 50-something desktop support technician, cries at least 3 times a week in the office, has been warned twice about viewing anime at work, walks with a cane and a very pronounced limp unless he thinks no one is around and he walks perfectly normally. He will randomly make animal noises throughout the day. I once had an intern who would pray over every task we gave her. She probably lost 2 hours of productivity in a shift. Load the autoclave. 2 minutes of intense prayer. File these folders. Sign off the cross. Label these containers. 40 seconds of bowed head muttering. All freaking day. Every freaking day. On top of that, we had to explicitly tell her each thing to do or she would stand idly by her station in the lab and just look at us. I have no idea how she operated a vehicle every morning to get to work, let alone how she found gainful employment after her internship was finally over. Sounds like OCD mixed with hardcore religious fanaticism. A long time ago, a girl came into my workplace, this was at a diner, for an application for serving. I asked if she'd like to fill it out now. She said yes, and sat down at a table, our only large table when there were plenty of two tops available, so I got the feeling she hasn't worked food service before. I was the only one working front of house that day, so I was taking care of my tables. Then I hear snapping. I look over and she's snapping at me. I walked over and asked if she was okay. I want pancakes. Oh, okay. Weird, but alright. I put in the order for her, bring the pancakes out, and keep working. More snapping. I'm done with this. She holds out the application, which is covered in syrup. I gave her the bill, and she says I thought this was my employee meal. Turns out she was the girlfriend of one of our line cooks. The application was so drenched in syrup and pancake crumbs I couldn't keep it. Her boyfriend asked if she should come back to fill out another. I just said we had too many servers so it wasn't necessary. That woman would have been a terror to work with. Snappers. Frick snappers. Except when they're pan fried and served with a red pepper oil. I hired a server engineer that I weird feeling about. I shook it off because my guys liked and had confidence in him. A couple of weeks in, I got a call from the Department of Justice working in a certain state verifying his employment. Strange, I've never had that before but blew it off thinking it was a child support thing. We worked for a couple local law enforcement departments so I ran his name through and it came up clean. No criminal history, but I just could shake my feelings. He then had to fly back to the city he moved from for a couple of days and needed time off. He did not say why nor did he tell any of the guys why. While he was gone I decided to let him go. Everyone thought I was such a bee for doing it. They didn't say anything but I knew. Fast forward a couple of months later, I hear a holy crap from my marketing guy's office. He started telling for us to come. There he sat stunned looking at a Yahoo page. Back when Yahoo had actual news. The guy had hacked into a huge medical company and stole tons of personal information and trashed their network before I hired him. He had committed suicide by stepping out in front of a tour bus doing 80 on a highway. Because he was found guilty and going to jail, he emailed his wife a suicide note. The last line of the Yahoo article said, due to the horrific nature of the accident the patrons of the bus company had to have extensive counseling. We all just stood there shocked to read it. I had a guy who was in his 50s. He worked for me in a blue-collar labor-intensive job. He was overweight, diabetic, and a hard party kind of guy. He told the oddest stories though, like the day he heard his 12-year-old son got his 14-year-old sister's schoolmate pregnant, or how his nickname was Angel. Proceed to show giant wings tattooed on his back, which he earned after sleeping with a prostitute that everyone nicknamed Lucifer, Odd Times Man. This guy should be a character on Supernatural. I had a co-worker when I was working in the food service industry. Fancy organic salad restaurant catering to high-paid government employees, who would manage to casually slip the fact she had herpes into general conversation. Customers, co-workers, the boss. It didn't matter who she was talking to, it always came up. Oh, you have kids? I think I would like to have kids but I would be worried because I'm not sure how they might be affected by my herpes during childbirth. You just got engaged? I can't seem to find a guy because I have to find someone who's okay with the fact I have herpes. When I was a teen I was the pool manager of a swimming pool. There was a weird kid who only worked maybe 3 shifts at my pool before the pool board president had him move to another pool. No one ever told me why, and I got traded a very attractive young man to get rid of the weird guy. It was team heaven, so I didn't question it. He got moved to the pool in my neighborhood, which was weird, but I didn't question it. He tattled to owner of the company and to the neighborhood board that I was drinking on my day off at the pool even though I was 19. So, my boss was mad, the neighborhood gossiped, and my parents were pissed. I thought the guy was in a shat and just started drinking at other people's pools on my day off. Then the cops showed up while I was at work. I was sure it was of his doing. How dare people have fun on his watch? They asked me if I was at my neighborhood pool just before my shift. I told them yes, I was. I was waiting to be breathalyzed. I was literally just laying out and trying to even out tan lines. No drinking. So they asked me about my time at the pool. Did you have anything to drink? Yes, sir. Water? Were you with anyone? No, sir. I had to be here at 3. Did you leave your water bottle unattended at any point? Pause. I guess. But it's not like it wasn't in my sight. It's a pool deck. It's open. Are you sure you didn't go to the bathroom or to your car? I guess I left it next to the bar table when I went to change. Have you drank from it since then? A couple sips. Did it taste weird? What? Yeah. Are they treating the water for something? Why, we're gonna need you to come with us. That mother sucker poured bleach and Rohypnol in the other 2 guards working and my water bottle. Somehow the weirdest part of the story is that they took me to the hospital to make sure I was okay, and that was literally the last time anyone talked to us about what happened. Holy frick. I really hope he got arrested and was court-ordered serious therapy, because that is beyond fricked. Tropical fish store had a Filipino employee that would consistently eat the fish food and the fish. His favorite was the flake fish food, and he had big buckets of it. He had a goatee and I would go in the back. Sam, have you been in the fish food again number? While his goatee was full of fish food flakes. I finally caught him back there just snarfing down handfuls of the stuff and taking dead fish out of the dumpster to take home to cook. Not a bad guy though. That's what happens when you hire Zoidberg. My husband works in HR and has told me some strange stories. Here are 2 of my favorites. Woman came to ask him if she could present to the other employees about the benefits of eating catnip in a PowerPoint presentation. A woman complained that she didn't want to wear her PPE apron because it made her vagina too sweaty, and she had to leave early to get it checked out by her doctor. I really want to see that presentation so much. Manager story. When I was 20 or so, I worked at a Texaco station that was both a gas station and an auto shop. I covered both parts. I pumped gas, state law in Oregon. Nobody pumps their own gas, and worked as a mechanic in the shop. The owners were a husband-wife team that were a real barrel of laughs. I was billed out at $60 hour flat rate, but I was paid $4.25 hour hourly. This was 1995 or so, and the wife constantly complained to all of us employees how expensive we were, how much we cost them in taxes and other legal fees. The husband worked in the shop also, and if you did something he didn't approve of, he'd throw a wrench at your head and scream at you for an hour straight. Except for when we did a good job. He wouldn't tell us we did a good job. He'd just brag about how much money he would make off our labor. For example, I replaced the head on a Toyota Supra, which took me all day. I made, gross, $38 for 9 hours worth of work, and he profited nearly $10k. I eventually figured out that they were cooking the books, and mainly screwing us employees on taxes, telling us they're set up to withhold taxes, while they were just pocketing the difference. I brought it up and they fired me on the spot. Hui. Gary. Hired him to do dishes at my busy kitchen. He was quiet, real quiet. He'd have a crew of creepy kids about his age, 16, bring him beers at night, but I never saw him drunk. He had classic lack of affect, never laughed, never smiled, didn't get it when people were joking or teasing him. After 6 months, I fired him. Tardiness and poor performance. Fast forward 4 years, Gary is charged with killing a woman and her son and burning their house down. He killed himself before the trial. The detective I talked to was positive Gary had killed at least 3 young women too, all Asian or mixed, just like my half Japanese girlfriend he'd been hitting on before I fired him. Frick Gary. Yep, frick Gary. I had an employee who used to tell me wild stories like her fiancé was part of the Jenner family and she didn't want the trashy Kardashians at her wedding. I should mention her fiancé was her ex-boyfriend's twin brother that she had no clue existed until after her ex-boyfriend died by bringing a shotgun into a hospital and having a standoff with police until they shot him. His way of committing suicide supposedly because his devout Catholic religion wouldn't allow suicide. I was in a constant state of WTF whenever she worked. Had an employee a few years back at the fast food restaurant I managed. Let's call him Jesse. He was a weird and scary dude. He had tattoos up past his neck and one on his face. I don't mind tattoos normally, but this was a bit much. And one was a Juggalo hatchet man. His tongue was split like a lizard's. He did this for that very purpose, mind you. Would make inappropriate comments to our underage employees, including checking them out blatantly. He's in his 30s. And his wife looked like Jabba the Hutt. He would constantly snap my suspenders like creepers do with bras. And when I told him to stop, he started telling the other employees he wanted to smash my head in. After that we fired him. And we had to have a police officer present. Cause I honestly feared for my safety. Luckily he didn't do anything and I never saw him again. He would constantly snap my suspenders. Sorry, but I laughed. Let's call her Tammy. Overweight, white, blonde, 23, from East Texas, had an 8-year-old mixed race child. Tammy was obsessed with wanting to be black. She wanted to name her daughter Latoya but didn't know how to spell it. Named her daughter something else, but her mother thought the name sounded too black, so her mother, who also had her first child at 15, called her granddaughter Peggy Jean. Tammy could not spell or do simple math. She was our receptionist. Our company was a woodworking business. She was supposed to help me with simple quotes, but even though I actually drew a diagram on the plate glass window in front of her desk, she could not get the concept of a square foot. When she turned 24, she cried all day because she was so old. She told me a confusing story about how her brothers threw a dead alligator at her. Some sort of shunning regarding her daughter. Her 6 siblings and her all grew up in different foster homes. Her life's ambition was to work for the DMV or the city we lived in. She did it too. The stories she would tell us left me gasping in disbelief. She was really odd and one of the sweetest people I have ever met. Someone I was managing threatened to leave the team at quite a critical time if I didn't buy him a better chair. I bought him a better chair. He left anyway. I forgot to expense the chair. Now that I think of it, this doesn't sound as odd written down as it was at the time to me. He made an unreasonable, but not completely outlandish, demand in an attempt to get fired so he could collect unemployment. When that failed, he left. I supervised a man who had his family stay in the parking lot during his shift and had 2 dogs when he couldn't afford rent. He had no teeth and looked like a XM head. His pregnant GF was pregnant for 14 months before she lost it. Never did she look pregnant, but only fat. He would tell me about his brother who would make money going BJ's, then later in the week he would be taking about all the money he himself had stumbled upon. Oh, and he wore women's thongs to work on more than one occasion. His pregnant GF was pregnant for 14 months. Oh, 14 months. What? Philip. We worked at a movie theater together and he used to count back people's change in pennies with a robot voice. He wouldn't actually give them pennies, just tell them the amount in pennies, in a robot voice. Brian drove an old Honda Civic with a bad muffler, but he thought it sounded soured up, so he loved it. He was 22 with a 19-year-old ex-wife and 3 kids. She'd call asking for money for the kids and he'd say, "Baby, I'm broke. You know I gave you $30 last week." Funny how the previous week he'd bragged about spending $80 on a big Honda tattoo. He had a bad tooth that he couldn't afford to have pulled, so it sat and rotted for a month. You couldn't stand to be within a couple feet of him, but he'd always come over and hover over your desk while you silently puked a little into your own mouth. I forgot to mention that Brian was a temp, and the manager was always about to let him go. Well, one Monday he called out sick. So the manager called the temp agency and told them we didn't want him back. They must have called him at home to break the news. And an hour later he walks in like nothing's wrong. We're all kind of staring uncomfortably at each other, and someone goes and tells the manager that he'd shown up. We're kind of hinting that maybe he'd gotten a call earlier that day, but he plays dumb. telling us that he was sick but all of a sudden started feeling better, so he decided to come into work. 20 minutes later, a couple big guys from the temp agency came in and asked him to get his stuff. He looked confused and we never saw him again, though we heard him leaving the parking lot due to that crappy tailpipe. I have many, not sure which one was more strange. 1. Guy in his mid to late 50s, working as a delivery driver at a Greek restaurant. He was creepy to talk to, but never more so than when he told us quite proudly that his daughter is a stripper and that she's really good. He would know, as he regularly went to watch her dance. 2. Woman in her late 30s, early 40s. This was at a casual dining fast food restaurant, so most of our employees were around 20. This woman seemed great. She was a quick learner, eager to please, etc. All good, until I get a text from the girl training her to close on her third shift. Turns out this woman believed that her mother was a white witch, making her more susceptible to demonic possession. Weird. Then she tells the girl that sometimes the demons scratch her at night. She comes in the next day with scratch marks on her arms, claiming that they proved that she is plagued by demons. 3. I was part of an inventory team counting liquor in the government liquor stores. There was a girl who showed up to one of them with a bike helmet on. No big deal. Maybe she rode in. Nope. Turns out she doesn't have a bike. She just thought it would be safer for her to wear that helmet at work than to go bareheaded. When asked to take it off as it wasn't part of the uniform, she pretended that she didn't hear the request. Repeatedly. His name was Harold. He was Filipino. During his time working with the company, he maybe spoke 50 words with me in 3 years. Almost every time was "Hey CS, baby" in his thick accent. I wasn't necessarily married when he asked me the first time either. I later found out why. He had an absolute fascination obsession with breast milk. Yes, you read that correctly. Breast milk. Here's how I found out. When I quit, he decided to throw me and another employee a party, consisting nearly entirely of karaoke and beer. I don't drink, but Harold proceeded to get completely pee. It was the most I heard him talk, and his wife was an amazing singer. It was shocking how they were the same height and build. Harold then asks me his famous question. CS, baby? No Harold, no baby yet, ha ha ha. Why do you always ask me? He then smiles a very creepy smile and stands up and signals me to come with him. We go into his basement and he opens up a freezer. This is one of those huge deep freeze type freezers that serial killers hide bodies in. I was sure I was going to die. Then I see it. Tons and tons of milk. I knew instantly it was breast milk. I just knew. Harold, I won't sell you my wife's breast milk, I said, certain he would be angry with me and chop me into little bits to feed dogs or something. Instead, he went on a rant about how healthy breast milk is, how good it tastes when you prepare it right. You should always drink breast milk when you're sick. He said it was a magical cure-all, and that it was all because God infused something in breast milk that would heal children of just about anything. I learned a lot about breast milk that night. Harold offered to sell me some. I declined as politely as possible and rejoined the party. I sang "Spice Up Your Life" that night, if you're at all curious. TLDR. Filipino man doesn't talk. Throws party. Shows me his collection of black market breast milk. I sing Spice Girls at 2:30 in the morning. I had just been hired at a major aerospace engineering contractor. First day on the job, I noticed another engineer, who had worked there for decades, was dressed in Victorian English type dress. It was a week or so before Christmas, and no one said anything about it, so I just assumed it was a holiday costume. When you work in engineering, you get accustomed to some odd characters. I realized eventually that this is how he dressed, every day. Okay, weird, but whatever. Learned that this guy was the creative genius behind a lot of very profitable products for our company, some of which were literally revolutionary and advanced the state of the art significantly. A bona fide genius. Also learned the guy's wife that he constantly talked about did not exist. He talked me into going by his house once after work to pick up some tools I needed, and everything in the entire house was white. White furniture, white accessories. Anything not white was inside a white box or white bag or white wrapping of some sort. About 2 years after I started working there, police came in one day and walked him out in handcuffs. It turns out he had murdered 3 prostitutes and kept their body parts in his house in wrapped gift boxes with bows. White, I presumed. When they were going through his stuff, they apparently found a huge collection of child pornography. He has been awarded several patents for guidance system related inventions while in prison, a few of which the company we had worked for bought the rights to and put into production. Weird mother sucker. My time to shine. Guy named Austin. In what you might call middle management at work. I have a whole team of people under me, but 2 levels above me. I'm responsible for a lot of the day-to-day operations. Austin was hired in as someone on equal level to me, 6 years before I was hired. Within 2 months of working at the job, I surpassed him in proficiency and job knowledge. I was teaching him things daily. He had absolutely horrible customer service. He was one of the cockiest, most standoffish, most rude service industry people I've ever met. The collective rest of the team, including me, both above and below me, got maybe 2 customer complaints a year. He by himself had about 5 or 6. He finally left us over a questionable injury. He saw a ticket out and took it. Our company attorneys did some digging in his history as part of the court battle, and found that he had quite a colorful history of leaving employers via workman's comp claims. It finally bit him in the butt, I guess. One of my favorite stories is the ex-con. Austin got really upset when people would come in within a half hour of closing time. This biker guy with what had to have been a full body of tattoos, ripped beyond belief, really rough demeanor came in 5 minutes to close. He had nothing but a backpack and said everything he owns is his motorcycle and what's in the backpack because he just left the prison. A part-timer was dealing with him. Dude wanted spark plugs for his motorcycle. Pete Guy was like, yep, NPB, right back. Austin walks up and asks what the guy needs. The guy chuckles and says, totally obviously jokingly, your other guys already got me. You guys need to get your act together, haha. Well, Austin gets all butthurt and starts verbally abusing the guy. They get into an argument. Austin tells the guy to leave the store. The guy is like, fine, I don't care, and starts leaving. He gets most of the way to the door, stops and says, listen man, I really need these plugs to get my bike going. I'm sorry, I'll stop talking. Just let me get my plugs and go. Austin is like, nope, leave. I was about to walk over and get involved because this is retarded, when the guy starts walking out and mumbling about meeting Austin in the parking lot after work. Well, Austin heard and yelled out, why wait until after work? I'm here right now, butthole. The guy spins around so fast it was a blur, slingshots his backpack across the store, physically rips his shirt off and starts running toward Austin. Austin was on the phone with 911 faster than the dude could even take another step. The guy picked up his stuff and left saying, yeah, that's what I thought. Austin never lived that one down. Many more stories if anyone is interested. I'd like to tell you of Sergio. I was overnight manager of a supermarket. Every department was forced to schedule an useless Sergio. He was very unemployable, but no good solid reason to fire him. So after being passed around every day department, he finally landed on graveyard. He lived up to the hype of useless. He had made it 3 whole nights. Then on the 4th he sailed out the door. I thought, well, good. That takes care of that. Well, shortly after, our Russian floor crew guy came out of the bathroom cussing excitedly in the only natural words he knew for such an occasion. I had to be led into the bathroom for a visual explanation. Sergio had left us a farewell present of his soiled underpants complete with soiled walls and floors, just balled up in the corner. No, he didn't. Nobody's that low. I threw up a little in my mouth. That's horrid. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.